Hello, and thanks for joining today's webinar from Real Story Group, an exciting one today. AI is certainly top of mind for everyone these days, and our lead DAM analyst and managing director, Jarrod Gingras, is going to walk through what that means in the DAM world. So 6 trends to keep an eye on as you focus on DAM in the year 2026. So he's going to take us through most of today's presentation, but as we get started, I do just want to briefly mention that you will be able to get a copy of these slides after today's session. So keep an eye out from an email from our marketing team, as they will get the slides to you, and a recording will be available to our subscribers as always, as are the rest of our recorded webinars available in your subscriber library. So if you know about Real Story Group, or if you're new to Real Story Group, you may or may not have seen this map in the past. This is our MarTech Stack subway map. These are the areas that we cover within our research and in the advisory calls that we have with our members. So there's 10 different lines on the subway map that you can see span the gamuts of the MarTech Stack. Today, we're going to focus on the dark purple line, which is digital asset management. So Jarrod will take us through more of that as we get rolling here today. But one thing I do want to mention that's really fundamental about Real Story Group is that we have taken a different approach to how we look at vendors in our 25 plus years now of being in business. So we never work for any of the vendors that we cover in any way, shape, or form. And what that means is that we're always sitting on your side of the table, the buyer's side of the table, making sure that we give you not just a clever name, but we give you the real story about what these vendors do well, but probably more importantly, what they don't do well and where they might fall short for you. And so we are not, we're not dependent on any of these vendors in terms of their subscriber revenue to us. We are just solely focused on making sure that you get the solutions that are the best fit for your unique needs. And there's really 3 different ways in which we engage with our customers. Sort of our traditional model has always been come to us, subscribe to our research. So in this case, subscribe to our DAM technology research, get some advisory hours with Jarrod as you look to select a solution that's going to be a good fit for your needs. We also more recently have really started to advise our customers more holistically on their stacks. So in this case, in our omnichannel stack advisory model, you'd have access to all of our research, but you'd also have access to our full team of analysts to really take you through those critical decisions as you're thinking about not just your MarTech stack today, but what it looks like for the rest of the 2020s and beyond. And the majority of those folks who work with us in that capacity also participate in our Stack Leadership Council. So this is a group of MarTech leaders from global organizations that meets quarterly in a completely vendor-free environment to share best practices, strategies, what's going well, where are some shared frustrations. So those quarterly meetings, the majority of them are virtual on a specific topic, and actually our next one later in February will be focused on metadata and taxonomy in an AI world. So may resonate with a lot of you folks and align with us today. And then we also have 1 to 2 in-person meetings a year, and our next one will be in Houston in April. So if you're ever interested in learning more about any of these different options to engage with Real Story Group, you can always reach out to Jarrod or myself. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Jarrod as he takes us through today's session. Jarrod?
All right. Well, thank you, Scott, and thank you all so much for taking time out of your busy days. We really appreciate that as always. Just a little bit about me. I've been with Real Story Group for, gosh, I think going on a little over 18 years now. I'm the managing director of Real Story Group, but I'm also our lead DAM analyst. I also wanted to give a quick plug to a little project that my colleague Tony Byrne and I have been working on in the last year, and that's our podcast called Real Story on MarTech. And the really main reason I wanted to bring it up today is to get you all to like, follow, subscribe, share with your friends, and all that kind of stuff. But a lot of the topics that I'm going to hit on a really high level today, we go into deep on this podcast. So if you're looking to learn more about some of the things that I bring up today, go check out the podcast, because there's a good chance we've already discussed that at a deeper level. But beyond that, if you want to get some one-on-one help, don't hesitate to reach out to me or Scott at any time. All right, Scott mentioned our vendor independence at Real Story Group, and I wanted to start with this today because I spent the first 3 weeks of 2026 sitting in on a bunch of vendor demos. I've been lucky to work with some really big brand clients who are going through the dam selection process right at this moment, and they scheduled some really intense vendor demo weeks, and I was really frustrated coming out of some of those, I'll be honest. So many of the vendors that we heard from are still touting the fact that they're leaders in this. This analyst said we're the leaders. That analyst said we're the leaders, and you can't all be leaders, guys. So it's really kind of frustrating as a analyst firm that adheres to a bit of a different model, that so much of this like churn that's happening is just vendors using other analysts as their marketing or extensions of their marketing team. So what you're going to hear today is solely my point of view and that of my colleagues. This hasn't been commissioned by any vendors. We're not in partnership with any vendors. It's not co-branded with any vendors or anything like that. This is the real story. All right. Let's, with apologies to Taylor Swift, let's talk a little bit about errors. We kind of framed this presentation today as trends to watch as it relates to DAM and the AI era, but we're in a period of transition here. I think when we started Real Story Group back in 2001, we were firmly in the web era, and I think many of us have grown up in that web era. And then we spent the last several decades thinking, how do we apply some of the lessons that we've learned in the web era to other channels that we want to meet our customers and prospects in? And so we really started getting serious about multi-channel, making sure our web experiences met what we're providing to our social channels and our email channels and our in-person channels and the like. And I think a theme that you've probably heard from Real Story Group in the last several years is people that we're working with in the 2020s are really getting serious about omnichannel again. And it's not a new term, but it's recognizing that we can't have disjointed experiences as we reach our constituents in a multitude of channels. So I think not many of us have cracked that nut, but the omnichannel concept, I think, has served as a kind of a nice North Star for many of us. Like, that's the goal that we're all marching towards. And in the process, we're going to do multi-channel really well, hopefully. But of course, AI has come into this equation and it's kind of upset the apple cart, right? And I think it has many of the leaders in our organizations and especially the organizations of the clients that we've had the opportunity to work with, telling us that we need to we're thinking about a future where this notion of channels is not even as important as it is today, right? This post-channel era, we're calling it. None of us know exactly what that's going to look like, but I think the thing that we're trying to think of is, how do we prepare our clients for this inevitable future where we lose some control? The channels are nice because we have controls over it, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in depth, but this post-channel era is no question in my mind that this is coming, and I think some of the smarter organizations that we work with are preparing for that, and a lot of that is contributing to some of the trends that we're seeing in the DAM world. So let's get into it. 6 trends that I'm going to call out today. As I was going through this, obviously we put a number of 6 on there to kind of keep me honest and time box this to a 30-minute webinar. But this is one of those years that I feel like I could have extended this list to about 20 different trends that we're watching. But today I'm gonna boil it down to my top 6. So I'm sure we'll evolve this as the year goes on. But trend number 1 is AI as a distraction, and the way I'm going to frame this is this concept that we're witnessing time and time again that I'm calling the feature frenzy. And what do I mean by that? Well, I mentioned those demos that I just attended the last 3 weeks and every other week of my life as an industry analyst following this space. There is such an investment by every vendor, but DAM vendors in particular, to embed AI into their platforms. And I don't blame them entirely, because guess what? AI in platforms provides some really cool demos and some value to their customers. And I know that buyers of DAM systems in 2026 are asking their vendors to show me what you're doing with AI, show me what you're doing with AI. And there's some really cool stuff as it relates to in-demo AI to help you enrich your assets, you know, better power and speed and accuracy as it relates to metadata, you know, how you transform those assets, how you manipulate your assets. Can you do that with more power, more speed, and at a greater scale? Can you use AI to improve their governance checks and making sure that the assets that you're creating meet your brand standards at a bunch of different checkpoints that don't rely on human intervention necessarily? Obviously, you have rights agreements and rules that you need to follow from a compliance standpoint, depending on the industry that you're in. You're using AI to kind of double check that, or do a first line of check on those kind of things. That's a huge win. And so none of these things are necessarily bad, but there's so much investment they're going into embedding it into that product. I think that might be a little short-sighted for the long term. So what do I mean by that? Well, if we work within DAM and we're embedding AI so much into that DAM system, great, but we can't lose sight of the fact that our DAM systems in 2026 and beyond are going to live in a larger ecosystem, right? Dams are not some system that's over in the corner and passing, and you know, that you go to and get the assets anymore and then go somewhere else to do with it. It lives within an ecosystem, and this is just a kind of a generic reference model, or a MarTech stack reference model, if you will. And if you think about where AI is today, AI is everywhere. And again, great stuff happening within all these different boxes that represent different systems and capabilities within our organizations. But I get a little nervous about this, because within each of these AI capabilities, within each of these systems, we're talking about different LLMs that you're dealing with, different vendors that you're dealing with, different contracts that you're dealing with, different governance rules that you're dealing with, all within each of these different systems across your enterprise. So I feel like what we're doing is kind of creating a situation where I think history is going to repeat itself again. You know, we've tried to break down silos for so many years in order to get to to that omni-channel goal that we've talked about, breaking down different channel specific silos. Well, it feels to me that we're creating new silos within each of these systems, and that feels maybe okay in the short term, but in the long term, I think that's going to bite some of us, and bite pretty hard. That brings us to trend number 2, which there's a clear boardroom directive for content in 2026. In 2025, one of the main themes that I ended up speaking about at a number of different conferences and to my clients throughout the year was that the role of DAM was rising. And that's really good news, I think, for many of us. But what that really means in practical speak is that the people making decisions around digital asset management in 2025 and continuing in 2026 is that these are not people with necessarily DAM in their titles or librarian in their titles. And no offense to my DAM managers and my librarians on this call, this is no offense to you, but the conversation has risen in so many organizations to a level that it was never existed before. You know, there's vice presidents and senior directors who are thinking, gosh, I need to make sure we have the right DAM to achieve this future that we have in mind. And why is that? Well, they're thinking big, and they're not thinking about just managing assets to manage assets for the sake of managing assets. They're thinking, how do I get to a point where I can power my hyper-personalized experiences that I want to provide? How do I implement a next best action or a next best experience strategy? How do I finally execute on this omni-channel North Star that I've been chasing? And of course, in the AI context, how do I build agents that really take advantage of our content, our data, our rules within our organization to provide the best experience to those people that need to interact with our brand regardless of where they do so and when they do so. So these big ideas, people are realizing they need content. The content is the fuel behind these big ideas, and getting there is going to be challenging if your content isn't ready for this. So let's tie this back to DAM, if you will. So we have these different eras that we're living in, and when clients come to us, they always ask, where am I on my readiness to get to this post-channel era? My leadership's asking me to help power these personalization efforts, to power these next best action efforts, to power those build new agents and build new omni-channel experiences. But where am I on this journey? Am I ready for that? And the fact of the matter is, not many people are ready for it. And so a few years back, we created this framework to kind of assess where our clients are today and where do they want to go. And so it's a 4-point framework, which I'll get into. But the fact of the matter, in today's day and age, the reality is that most enterprises fall within this DAM 1.0 or DAM 2.0 construct. DAM 1.0 being DAM as a standalone library where you're managing assets through a life cycle. Great. DAM 2.0 being DAM as a connected part of the ecosystem, but DAM is really just one part of this workflow. This assets flowing into the DAM and flowing out of the DAM, but it's a one-way flow of information. And I have to be realistic when I talk about where most people are. Not only are a bunch of clients in the 2.0 category and 1.0, some are still at a 0 point something. And if that's you, you're certainly not alone. There's a bunch of you out there, but there's a ton of people stuck in these situations. And now their leaders, as we just talked about, are asking, how do I get here? How do I get to 4.0? Because they might not be using the words DAM 4.0. They might not be using the words intelligent responder necessarily, but what they are talking about is, I want to be able to provide the right content to the right person in context. I want to be able to respond to humans that are interacting with my brands and agents that are interacting with my brands, and I want to do so at a scale that I've never been able to do before. And I want to create loops that get better over time, so that my content gets better over time based on the data that I'm collecting and based on real interactions at the edge and where people are experiencing my content. So that's a very different concept that leaders are asking for, but the reality is people are still in the beginning stages of this framework. That brings us to number 3, which is this need to support a content demand chain. Now, I speak at a lot of DAM conferences through the course of the year, and I talk to a lot of clients who are going through their DAM journey. And inevitably, those conversations lead to this discussion around, where does DAM fit in the content supply chain? And the good news for DAM folks is that DAM fits very neatly in the content supply chain. You start with some data or information, maybe it's a product, maybe it's a campaign brief, maybe you get some information from your product systems like a PLM or a PIM system. You do production where you're creating assets in a creative suite of tools, or Canva or Figma or Premiere if you're working with NVIDIA. And ultimately, you want to get stuff out into the world, so you're gonna give stuff to your engagement tools like your web publishing systems and your social publishing tools and your email tools, and that's going to get out to these channels. And DAM fits really neatly in this, because if you do this right, DAM alleviates a lot of friction here, right? It provides some control in this linear process that is really beneficial. You start to managing assets through a life cycle, and it's a very important way station in this content supply chain. So this traditional content supply model is really focused on creation, efficiency, and getting assets from the ideation phase out to the delivery, right? So we talked about creative briefs, production workflows, management, approvals, publishing, distribution, and then if we're lucky, we measure how successful we were, but that's often disconnected in a lot of times in a totally different system, and it doesn't really always make it back to the asset, even in the best of cases. So I want to introduce this concept of the demand chain, and this flips this on its head a little bit, because I think when we talk about this 4.0 world, what we're describing is this content demand chain. So it's an emerging model focusing on listening, adaptation, real-time response to content performance, and audience context. So feedback and engagement, what actually happening with your audiences are going to drive new creation, right? This is a fundamental difference from this one-way flow of information. We're now creating this loop where we're learning and optimizing over time. If that's where we're trying to get to, how are we going to get there? That brings us to trend number 4, which is the rise of the content warehouse. Going back to our framework, as we mentioned, everyone that we talk to, whether they're using the same words or not, is talking about a 4.0 future. And now the question is, how are we going to get there? And so many people that I talk to think that AI is the answer. It's the answer of how we're going to get from where most people are in a 2.0 world, or even a high functioning 2.0 world, how they can get to this 4.0 world. They're going to apply some AI to it, and it's going to solve all the problems. Well, I can tell you where we're experiencing now, or witnessing and observing right now from our clients and a whole bunch of other people that we talk to as part of our research. There is so much experimentation happening here, and there's a lot of cool successes that we're seeing, but I put them all in this category of what we're calling pilot purgatory. You know, pilots have successes for a real short period of time. They can maybe solve a single use case or a couple use cases, but at scale, a lot of these pilots are breaking down really hard. And I'm here to tell you that based on what we've seen, I firmly believe that if you really want to reach 4.0 at scale in your enterprise, you need a content warehouse. You need this 3.0 step. You cannot skip it completely to achieve the 4.0 at scale. What is a content warehouse? Well, it's causing organizations to think differently about how you manage content. So I want to challenge all of you traditional DAM folks on this call to think bigger, right? So think bigger in terms of managing my core media alongside of some non-traditional DAM stuff like narrative and data, all managed as first-class objects in a system, you know, that is tied together with a sophisticated graph model. So I want you to be able to manage components so that you can provide those components and build experiences no matter what channel that you're trying to reach. I want you to think about applying Gen AI to help you create variants on these components and content in ways that we may have never done before. So creating sibling variants for personalization within a structured warehouse type of environment. And then maybe really important here is, instead of a one-way flow of information that we saw in the 2.0 world, start to tie usage data back to the content and live side by side with that content so that it can inform future decisions by humans, or more importantly, and more prevalently, by machines in this 4.0 world that we're envisioning. So there's a couple related topics that really bubble up when we talk about a 3.0 content warehouse world, and I'm not going to get into it in ultra detail today, but again, I'm challenging you all to think big. So don't just think about managing assets within this content warehouse. Think about what entities you need to model and manage in these environments as well. You know, do your products need to be managed as entities? Do your people, whether they're your internal employees, your external constituents that you're trying to reach, do those need to be modeled as entities? Your brands, your sub-brands, your campaigns and initiatives, your rights, your license, your channels, touch points, markets, geographies, doesn't matter. These are all things that can be modeled, and if they're modeled within a system and you can create relationships between these entities, you can start asking a lot more sophisticated questions of your content repositories, not just, hey, what was that image that we used in that campaign last year? You can ask some really sophisticated questions and get some really sophisticated answers. So here's just a quick example. We've been lucky to work with several of the biggest hospitality chains in the world, and you know, they're all thinking about modeling entities within their systems to be able to provide richer experiences for their customers. You know, and their customer, they provide a kind of a really interesting use case, I think, because if you think about your interaction with a hospitality brand, it's not just a website experience. It's an in-person experience. It's a app experience. It's a text experience. It's a whole variety of different touch points that you go through. But in order to create these really sophisticated experiences, they need to really get into what kind of entities that they want to manage within their content warehouses. Scott mentioned the next council meeting of our clients that we'll be having later in February is going to be around taxonomy, because as an information architect, way back when I started my career before becoming an analyst, that's kind of my first thing. I got to build some of the earliest taxonomies for some of the earliest websites that were built, and I've always been a taxonomy fan, but I've been kind of chuckling in the background as this role of taxonomy kind of begins to rise again and again as it relates to AI. And if you have your taxonomies in place, I think you're going to get a lot more out of your AI than hoping AI is just going to figure things out for you. This is how you organize your training data for the LLMs you're going to be using. This is how you improve accuracy in predictions. This is how you explicitly state things are related or not related, and don't leave it up to the guess of LLMs. And I think the organizations that have given this level of thought to kind of the content structure behind the scenes are going to be way faster and way more confident in how they execute on their AI initiatives. So that brings us to the vendors in 2026. I use the unicorn icon here because every vendor I talk to thinks they're unique and special. They're not. But when you kind of plot each of these vendors to where their capabilities lie on this framework, I think a lot of vendors are stuck in the 2.0 realm, and there are a handful of vendors who are kind of thinking bigger and able to get bigger because they built their systems in a way to prepare them for this more sophisticated relationships of content management. And for those of you who are Real Story Group members, if you want a version of this slide with the actual logos in place, I'll be happy to talk you through that. Just feel free to reach out. But the fact of the matter is, not all damn vendors are going to be your content warehouse in 2026. They're all telling that story, but they're not. I don't think they're all ready to deliver for you. And we're witnessing some pain from our clients in this space. And it's really important to notice that it's not just damn vendors who want to be your content warehouse. We see data warehouse vendors and web CMS vendors and CRM vendors all recognize that there's a gap here, and they're all coming for this space. So that's my warning to the damn vendors. Get ready, because you're not just competing with your peers. Trend number 5, as we run a little late here, is preparing for more loss of control. As we talked about in this post-channel world, I think we've lost control over where content experiences happen. So we need to be ready to provide some structure to our content so that our content is more portable. And so I think those organizations that, again, have really thought through this content warehouse concept are going to be able to port their content to where the people are, whether that's through partners that they need to work with, or new channels that emerge, or agents that are just looking to consume their content, whether they're public agents or private agents, it doesn't matter. But your content needs to be portable and ready to use, and I think that all is very much in line with this content warehouse concept. And then finally, number 6, smarter storage decisions. This is an extension of a theme that we called out last year in 2025. We talked about the emergence of green dam, where I think sustainability efforts are going to be starting to focus on digital assets in particular, because of the scale in which we're producing assets in today's day and age. Not surprisingly, probably, is that most of the organizations that I work with are now tackling the same problem, but not for their altruistic reasons, that they want to save the planet, but they're more thinking about, gosh, this is getting expensive. So we see our clients and others and looking at new dam systems and going to the dam vendors and saying, hey, you're holding all of our our content. We're creating more content at paces that we've never done before. How are you going to help us manage these costs in a really smart way? And the good news is some vendors have a really good story here and others do not. Some vendors have a really good way of helping you through this, managing content as not all being equal, but being able to really sophisticatedly manage content through a life cycle. And we've seen some real cost savings if you do this right. So it's a really powerful thing. And you might help the environment in the meantime. So here's our framework for 2026. We continue to update this as we see fit. I hope it's useful to you. If you want help plotting your organization on this chart and getting some assistance on how to get to where you want to go, give us a shout. We'll be glad to help. But I hope these 6 trends to watch in 2026 resonate with all of you, and I look forward to having more discussions with you as we progress throughout this year. But thank you all for joining today. Don't hesitate to reach out, whether it's on LinkedIn or via email, or check out our research, and you'll be seeing a lot more from us on the DAM space in 2026 and beyond. So thank you all for joining. Have a great rest of your day.